Without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite our first speaker today, Charles Ng, Technical Manager, Softlines from TUV Rheinland Hong Kong, presenting on EU's proposed PFAS restriction and fashion's future. Everyone, please join me in giving a big round of applause to welcome Charles.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So I think the first thing I want to share is that I want to say thank you to Global Sources for their invitation for us to join this event, to share some of our experience in some chemical testing services and some of our experience and understanding on some upcoming chemical regulations. So our company is TUV Rheinland, and we are a German-based company. However, we have different global footprints in different countries all over the world. We have different offices and laboratories in different continents, in different countries, and also in different regions and cities. We have found, our company was founded for more than 150 years, and consumer product testing is one of our major business lines. And I think apart from testing services, we are eager, we are feeling a much demand to share some of our understanding on chemical regulations and some of the chemical testing requirement. Just like for today, we just come to this event to try to share some of our experience and understanding on some upcoming changes on some chemical regulations. So I'm not sure if you have heard of this term PFAS before that or not. PFAS is a very popular substance right now, and I think it is a very hot topic, not just in EU, but also in US and also in other countries as well, because a lot of people, a lot of authorities, a lot of NGOs are looking into depth on this substance because they show some concern on their usage in different consumer products. So before I go through those chemical regulations, upcoming changes, the first part I want to share with you is that what is the background of PFAS, why they are important and why they are present in different kinds of consumer products. So PFAS is a particular group of substances that show very special properties. Normally, they are intentionally used. Normally, I want to give some function on some products, so I intentionally use those PFAS substances. So the particular properties is that they are very resistant. Yeah, so they can be resistant in different external conditions. Like they can be resistant to heat, they can resistant to water, they can resistant to other external conditions. And so that is one of the major reasons why PFAS are used in different consumer products. So, for example, they are chemically inert, they are resistant to different external extreme weather conditions, they can protect corrosion, they can be resistant to radiation, they can be resistant to oil, water, stain, and they have a very low coefficient of friction as well. They can be resistant to temperature, they are also resistant to electrical currents, and also finally, they are stable against fire, flame, and also they have a significant properties of non-flammability. So the major feature that PFAS is so important in different industries is that they are very resistant. However, apart from their resistance, they can be manufactured in different size, they can be manufactured in different shape, and also they can be manufactured in different thickness. So you can use PFAS basically in a lot of different applications. And also apart from their properties that can be easily manufactured in different shapes, thickness, size, they can be applied to different materials as well. So when you are talking about paper, plastic, coatings, or even electronic components, you can find their footprints in different materials because they can be easily applied to different materials. And so that is the rationale why PFAS is so common in different industries. So for example, they are used in production of PTFE, You can see the use of PFAS also in metal plating, photo imaging, and even the semiconductor industry. And also they can be used in biocide. One of the major use of PFAS is the manufacture of non-stick cookware, kitchenware, also firefighting foam. And I think for today, one of the major concerns is the use of PFAS in fashion industry, particularly related to clothing that show water, oil, and stain-proof characteristics. And also they can be used in furniture. And another major category that uses PFAS finally is the food packaging. So this table can show you which industry are the major stakeholders of using PFAS. And one of the major stakeholders of using PFAS is the TULAC, which stands for textile, upholstery, leather, apparel, and carpets. So I think tool industry is one of the industry that use PFAS a lot because a lot of the weatherproof garment, a lot of the water stain or oil repellent material for your clothing, for your footwear, have been using PFAS for a very, very long year already. And so tool industry is really one of the industry that's really the major stakeholders of using PFAS. And another industry is the food contact materials, in case if you are using some non-stick cookware or you are using some paper for wrapping your hamburger, storing your French fries, and then normally they will have some paper packaging that contain PFAS to resist the grease released from the food. So I think the advantage of PFAS on one side, unfortunately, is the disadvantage on the other side. Why I say that is because, so when those PFAS are used in the consumer products, they are really very resistant. They can resist different external conditions. However, when those chemicals, when they are disposed into the environment, they are also very resistant to the environment. So they are not going to degrade and not going to decompose, and they exist in the external environment for a very, very, very long time. And so that's the dilemma we are facing. We want the chemicals used in our consumer product to be very stable, to be resistant to the external condition. However, as a matter of fact, if they are very resistant in the consumer product, after use, when they reach the end of life, when they are released to the environment, this major feature, this characteristic, will lead them to a fact that they are also very resistant to the environment. So that's the current dilemma that we are facing right now. If I am a research scientist, the best thing I want to make is that the chemicals can be very resistant in the product, but they will be readily degradable in environment. That is the ideal solution for every one of us. However, I think that is really the goal that every scientist wants to achieve. But right now, it is very difficult for this to happen. So I think that is the dilemma we are facing right now. So I think those environmental characteristics has earned PFAS in a nickname called the forever chemical, because they are likely to exist in the environment forever. And so not so good, but that is the nickname right now. However, apart from the environmental concern of PFAS, more and more scientific evidence are pointing to the direction that, apart from environmental concern, PFAS may lead to some health hazard as well. So some of the scientific papers are already suggesting that PFAS may lead to liver damage, thyroid disease, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, low fertility, testicular cancer, and they are suggesting that PFAS may be carcinogenic in nature. And so I think that's aroused the concern from different authorities, because at the beginning of the PFAS, maybe we are just looking for the characteristics of the concern in environment, but right now the concern are moving from environmental to the human health risk. So I think this shows the entire life cycles of PFAS from their production to the end of life. So I think we are facing different sources of the PFAS. The major part, of course, is the factories. If your factories are using those PFAS substances, then of course the surrounding environment of the factory is having a high risk of being affected by the PFAS. And I think our second speaker will talk about this, because we should have some control on using proper chemicals in the factory. Otherwise, the surrounding environment, the ambient environment, will be affected by those chemicals. And also for consumer products, if we have day-to-day contact with those consumer products containing those PFAS, we may be affected by the PFAS present in the consumer product as well. Of course, the third sources will be the waste. Every product, every materials, at the end of the day, they will become a waste. And so when they become a waste, and if they are not properly treated, then they will affect the environment as well. So I think those PFAS may enter to the aquatic environment. Maybe they are released from the factory directly, or maybe they are released from the waste consumer product disposed into the water resources, or they may be released as a waste. Then they will come to the water resources, to the water environment. Then those PFAS will begin to exist in the environment, like the ocean, like the river, like to the lake. Then because PFAS, normally they will not degrade in the water environment. They will exist for a very, very long time. And then when the time goes by, they're prone to accumulate. The amount, the quantity of the PFAS will get higher and higher. And so when the water environment is getting more and more PFAS, then there are living organisms living in those water environment, like some marine organisms, like some fishes and other aquatic animals. So they will be affected, and those PFAS will enter to those marine organisms, will enter the food chain, and then other animals who are the higher consumer of those fishes, of those marine organisms, may be affected as well. Because once those chemicals enter to the food chain, then every consumer, no matter you are at the higher level or the lower level, you will be affected by those PFAS, because you are part of the food chain, you are part of the food web. I think the last column is showing that at the end of the day, every citizen, every human being are finally affected by the presence of the PFAS from the environment as well, because every one of us will consume different kinds of food. And then when the food chain is contaminated by the PFAS, at the end of the day, PFAS may find a path to enter to our human body as well. So I think some of the research in EU has already found out that in the blood sample of some EU citizens, we can find the traces amounts of the PFAS in the blood samples of the European citizens. So, of course, I'm not saying that we are facing a disaster and then it is a crisis. But I think at the end of the day, nobody wants their blood to contain those PFAS. That is not a nice thing. And so I think that is the drivers, especially for the European Union. They are trying to look into this topic and so to show some of the activities. They want to reduce the use of the PFAS in different kinds of products. So PFAS, though it is a very popular term right now, it is a substance that's under the spotlight from different authorities, from different governments. However, it is not an entirely new regulations. If you are talking about the first PFAS regulation, we can go back to 2006. The first PFAS regulation, which is the PFOS, has been already effective, I think, many, many years ago. Then the first PFAS regulated is the PFOS, then the next one is the PFOA, and then when the time goes by, we have some US regulation some US model legislation on PFAS. We have some EU regulations in 2021. Then we have some US state law in 2022 and 2023. And then we have another regulations that has become effective last year, which is the PFHSS. And then we expect there will be new regulations on another type of PFAS called the PFHSA, which shall be effective soon. Then the ultimate goal in EU is talking about the universal restriction of PFAS across different kinds of products. So this table tries to show you a summary of the existing regulations talking about the PFAS. So I think if we refer back to our timeline in the last slide, we have some regulations of PFOS, we have the regulation on PFOA, we have regulations on PFCA, we have regulations on PFHSS, and then finally we are going to have a new proposed regulation in PFHSA. I think it's going to be effective very soon because the REACH committee has already voted favorable for this regulation. And so I think the regulation for PFHSA very likely will be effective in a few months. So there is a very important point I want to share is that all these regulations are talking about the specific PFAS substances. So right now, the EU regulations are only applicable to specific PFAS substance. So right now, only PFOS, PFOA, C9 to C14 PFCs, PFHSS, and the proposed PFHSA are regulated, are restricted. So in principle, if you are using PFAS does not belong to them, you are still allowed to be used right now at this moment. So the current regulation in EU apply only to specific PFAS. However, the trend of EU is trying to move forward to regulate PFAS in a more general sense. Very likely, they are looking for the direction to ban the use of PFAS for all type of them. So, because I can share with you one of the rationale. If you are talking about PFHSA, which is likely to be effective in a few months, this substance, PFHSA, was supposed to be a replacement for PFOA. So I think many, many years ago, when PFOA has been banned, when PFOA has been restricted, then people are, of course, trying to find some alternatives. Then one of the alternatives they were trying to use was PFHSA. However, 10 years later, PFHSA is supposed to be banned as well. And so you can see that there is a need not to regulate specific substances. Because if we regulate specific substances, maybe some years later, because of the similar nature of those chemical substances, then they may be banned in the future as well. And so that is one of the drivers for EU to think about. We cannot do it in a specific way. We need to have a general concept on banning the use of the PFAS. So a lot of the specific PFAS are also SVC. And so if you are not new to SVC, you know that SVC are still allowed to be used, but you need to fulfill different obligations to inform the consumer, if need, to inform the ECHA if you have a significant quantity being used in your products. So PFAS in EU, they have a very specific homepage. So because they are really one of the important topics right now in EU, and they are in the discussion for setting up a new regulation that will forbidden the use of all kinds of PFAS in all kinds of consumer products. So that is the rationale why EU are trying to propose to trying to restrict the use of PFAS in a general sense. So because there are so many types of PFAS you can use in the world. We are talking about at minimum 4,700 kinds of PFAS that may be used in different products as from the perspective of PFAS. And those PFAS, they accumulate over time in humans and also in environment. So because from the regular survey of the environmental monitoring of the water samples or the blood samples, we always see the trace of PFAS in different environment, in different samples. So when those national authorities of individual member states perform their survey monitoring of their water samples, they always find PFAS in their environmental samples, especially in the water samples. And also, it may happen that they can even find the footprints of PFAS in drinking water. And also, PFAS is a substance that is very mobile. So even if you go to some areas, nobody are living there, you can still see the traces of the PFAS in those areas without any people, because PFAS is mobile. They can be transported through wind, they can be transported through water streams, and different kinds of carriers can even contaminate the areas where nobody are living there. And so they are very mobile, and so you can see really the traces of their footprints in different areas. And then we have mentioned before, apart from the environmental concern, human risk is also a more and more concern right now from the EU authority, because they already find some PFAS in the blood samples of European citizens. And the last concern is that it is very difficult to perform a substance-by-substance risk management, because it is very time-consuming. There's so many PFAS that can be used in the world, and EU cannot handle them one by one. They cannot set up a regulation for one, set up the regulation for 2, for 3, for 10. But there are so many for them, they cannot handle them one by one. If they are looking for the regulations for the PFAS one by one, it will take a very, very long time to accomplish that. And I wonder, it is not practical to accomplish that. And so that is the rationale why, if we see there is a concern in environment, we see a concern in human health, then EU has made a decision that, okay, we move on to try to forbid their use in a more general way. We don't look for the particular PFAS substance one by one. So I think that's the rationale why EU is trying to propose a universal ban of the PFAS. So this is the proposed regulation. So this is just a proposal right now for a disclaimer. It is not the final regulation, and so don't take it for granted that it will happen in this way. It is just a proposal. So they're right now trying to have some regulation for individual PFAS. They shall not exceed the limit of 25 ppb. For the sum of individual PFAS, they shall not exceed the limit of the 250 ppb. So the limit are really, really low, because ppb is talking about parts per billion. And then the final requirement is the 50 ppm for total fluorine content. So that is a key concept of the total ban, because total fluorine is an indirect indicator on the presence of the PFAS. So right now in this proposed regulation, when they adopt the total fluorine content of 50 ppm, they are looking for a general ban that all kinds of PFAS consequently containing fluorine shall not be used if they exceed this limit. So that is a new thing, yeah. For the total fluorine, it is not a specific substance. It is a general indicator to try to enforce the restriction of PFAS, because every PFAS share a common factor that they will contain fluorine. So this new regulation is trying to adopt a general ban by adopting a requirement of the total fluorine content. So in case if your product is detected with a positive fluorine content, then your supplier really need to look about whether PFAS are used, or in some very extreme cases, some non-PFAS may contain fluorine as well. Typical examples are the inorganic fluorine, like the fluoride in the toothpaste. Yeah. However, I think in the majority of the consumer products, I think from my experience, 99% of the fluorine detected in the consumer product, normally they originated from the source of the PFAS. So if the ban become effective, there's a transition period for 1.5 years for general consumer products. So for general textile, garments, clothing, footwear, without any special functions, so normally they have to comply with the law when the regulation enter into force after 1.5 years. So this applies to general consumer products, including general textile articles. However, some of the products can enjoy a longer, extended transition period, in case if they fall into the category that's the regulation provide an extended transition period. There are quite a lot of different product categories that are given with extended transition period. However, if we are talking about textile products, so normally if the textile are used in personal protective equipment against hazardous chemicals and biological agents, they can enjoy a longer extended transition period. At the same time, if the textiles are used in personal protective equipment in professional firefighting activities, they can enjoy a longer transition period, which is up to 13.5 years as well. However, I want to stress that this extended transition period do not apply to all kinds of personal protective equipment. It is only applied to personal protective equipment that are fighting against the hazard of the risk of the category 3, which is the life-threatening hazard. So if PFAS are used in PPE, which is fighting those life-threatening hazards, then they can enjoy a longer transition period. However, if it is just an ordinary oven gloves, if it is just a face mask to fight against COVID, they are not fighting against the life-threatening hazards. So they cannot enjoy this extended transition period. Yeah, so that is a very important point. It is still at the beginning stage of the proposal for the EU regulation. Right now, EU has already completed the consultation, and I want to draw your attention that more than 5,600 of comments have been received by the ECJ. That is tons of the comments received from the public. I've never seen for a EU regulation that's received so many comments from the public, from the stakeholders. So I think they still need to have a very, very long time to digest the comment and carry out different meetings to finalize the draft regulation. And it is assured that the draft of the PFAS regulation are likely to be amended after the consultation. So because it is still in the drafting stage, and the ECJ still need to arrange different meetings from different stakeholders to discuss how to have the best content of the regulation so that it can protect the environment, it can protect the human health, but at the same time, it is feasible for the industry. And so right now, I think there are different meetings, and one of the meetings will be held in September of this year, which will focus on the discussion of the PFAS used in textile, upholstery, leather, apparel, and carpets. So I think we will see if there will be any changes after this meeting, especially related to test articles. And in case if there are those changes, for sure, we want to update you in different channels. So I think that's the end of my presentation. In case if you want to receive the PowerPoint presentation of of today, then you can scan the QR code, and then our colleagues will send you the PDF file so that you can keep this for your record. So that's the end of my presentation. So I think that's the time for questions, I believe.
So if there are any questions to Charles, please raise your hand and we will pass the microphone to you.
Hi, my name is Lars from Germany, and we are aware of PFAS because we work for the automotive industry and provide them with merchandise products. When we ask most of our vendors, they have no idea about it. And when we ask testing institutes, we haven't asked you so far, they don't know how to test it, and if they know how to test it, they ask us to test like for 50 or 100 different items, which will be very costly. So how to overcome that, to educate the vendors?
Yeah, I think, so to answer your first question, I think it's really talking about the chemical management. Yeah, because when we are talking about the regulation 10 or 20 years ago, testing is fine. When your product can comply with the testing regulation, then I will be safe and I can ship my product. But right now, I think a lot of the regulation cannot be solved just by testing. We really need to have a system of chemical management. And I think, especially for the textile industry, I think if you are really having a good management in MRSL, I think the our second speaker is going to cover this one. If you have the MRSL, then I think you already have a better tool to manage, because MRSL is already a tool that tries to help the textile industry to manage the chemicals, not just on your garment factory, not just tier 1 supplier. And those regulations need to pass on to your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers so that they know I really need to have a control of the chemical at the beginning of using the raw material. Yeah, because control at the finished garment is already too late. Yeah, you cannot have any impact on the final product. So that is the suggestion that apart from testing, then try to have a better chemical management system. Know your suppliers, what kind of chemicals they are using, have some checking on the documents, and also have some control on using those raw material. If you are really participating in the MRSL, make sure that you only buy MRSL certified product. So I think that will give you a better guarantee on the quality of your raw material. The second part for the testing, I agree, because right now, especially for EU, it is still not finalized how it should be tested. Yeah, because if we are talking about the proposed regulation, they are testing in two perspectives. The specific one, which is likely talking about 100, 200 specific PFAS substance, but another perspective is testing the total foreign content. However, it is still a draft right now at this moment. So I think in case if the content of the regulation are finalized, maybe we will have more and more insight on what should be the proper test to be arranged. But I agree, yeah, for EU, for PFAS, there is still no harmonized test method to cope with the upcoming universal restriction of the PFAS. Of course, if you are talking about the existing regulation, that's fine. PFOS, PFOA, PFCA, even for the PFHC, normally there should be already existing method. But if you are talking about the general group, the entire family of the PFAS, maybe there's really no a official harmonized standard method that everyone agree to use. Yeah, hope I can answer your question.
Thank you very much for your presentation.